Hi, fourth grade boys and girls. It's Mrs. Rosado. I'm playing with technology today, so I'm going to pretend I'm on the beach because why not? We can't go anywhere. We're stuck in our houses. So I'm going to make the best of this day and pretend I'm on the beach. You see the trees blowing behind me? It's like a warm breeze. The waves are crashing in the background. And this is hopefully going to soothe you as I read our story of the week for Journeys, which is I Could Do That. So I'm going to read this story. It's a real story, which is an informational text. It's a story about an amazing woman who helped change the voting laws in the United States. This is a biography. So think a minute what a biography is. A biography is a story about someone's life. So you will hear real information about someone's life. You might also want to consider how the author organizes the text structure. The author might organize it in time order. Usually they do that for biographies. So they might start out in the person's childhood and show you how they move on as they grow up and get older. And they're also going to, of course, include the things that that person has accomplished. So think of those things as I'm reading. What did this woman do? Why is she famous? What did she accomplish in her life? I'm going to share out my screen here so that you can see the story as I'm reading it to you. So the story is called I Could Do That. It's a story about Esther Morris, Get Women the Vote. This story is written by Linda Arms White, and the pictures, the illustrations were done by Nancy Carpenter. An essential question or a guiding question you might want to think about as we're reading is what causes change in a community? So we are going to hear about some problems that Esther's community is having, and we want to think about what is causing them to change the community. I could do that. In 1820, 6-year-old Esther McQuigg studied her mother making tea. I could do that, she said. Make tea? Asked Mama. The older girls do that. But I want to learn, said Esther. And she did. She pumped water into the kettle and set it on the wood stove to boil. She scooped tea leaves into the teapot, then poured steaming water over them. Esther strained the tea into cups, one for her mother, one for herself. As they sat near the window of their New York house, Esther saw men riding by in their best suits, some carrying flags. So take a moment to look at the illustration. There's Esther and her mother sipping tea that she made on her own. She was very determined to do that. You see some men walking by with their flags and horses. And remember, the year is 1820, boys and girls. That is 200 years ago. So we really have to put ourselves back into the past. Where are those men going, Mama? Asked Esther. They're going to vote for the next president of the United States, Mama said. Will Papa vote? Yes, Papa always votes. Will you vote, Mama? No, dear, only men can vote. When Esther was 8, she watched her mother sew a fine seam. The needle pulled thread in and out, tracking tiny, even stitches across the fabric. Esther felt her hands mimicking her mother's. I could do that, she said, and she did. She made clothes for her doll from scraps, and when her stitches became neat and straight, she sewed a shirt for Papa. When Esther was 11, her mother died, and for the first time she saw her father cry. He gathered his 11 children together. I don't know what we'll do without your mama, he said. I'm depending on each of you to be brave and to take care of one another. Esther, 8 of the 11, cried too. But then she said, I can do that, Papa. And she did. So before I move on, I want you to just think about the few different things that we know about Esther so far. we know that she's very determined. Every time she sees someone doing something, she wants to do it. And even when they tell her no, she does it anyway. So now they're going through a tough time in her life, in her childhood, but she is saying that she will get through it. So let's see if she does. When Esther was 19 and 6 feet tall and on her own, she earned a big living making dresses with legs of mutton sleeves for society ladies. When the ladies wanted hats to match the dresses, Esther designed and made those too. Soon she thought of opening a millinery shop. I'm not sure what a millinery shop is. I've never seen one of those around. So I want you to think about the context in which we just read, the context in where the word is in millinery. So see if we can figure out what it means. When the ladies wanted hats to match the dresses, Esther designed and made those too. So Esther's making hats to match dresses, and she's thinking of opening a millinery shop. So a millinery shop is a shop that makes hats. You are much too young to run a business, she was told. I don't see why, said Esther's reply, and with that she opened a hat shop in Owego, New York. Esther started attending abolitionist meetings at her church, but a throng of people who believed in the right to own slaves threatened to stop the meetings, even if they had to tear down the Baptist church where they were held. You can't do that, Esther said. I'll stop anyone who tries. So I always want to stop as I'm reading, check for understanding. So right now we're going to take a little pause and think about all the things we're learning. At this point, Esther is grown up. She's 19 years old. She wants to open her own business, a millinery shop, which means a hat shop, and you can see that in the illustrations. She's also attending abolitionist meetings at her church. I don't know what that word means, but again, if I look and reread the text, I think I can figure out what these meetings were about. It said a throng of people who believed in the right to own slaves threatened to stop the meetings. So if people who owned slaves wanted these meetings to stop, I think abolitionist meetings have to do with ending slavery. Remember, this was 200 years ago, boys and girls, so slavery was going on during this time, and Esther wanted to be a part of stopping it. When Esther was 28, she married Artemus Slack, and a few years later had a son called Archie. But when Artemus died in an accident, Esther made a big decision. I'm moving to Illinois, she told her friends. I'll claim the land Artemis owned there and raise our son. You can't do that, her friends cried. Illinois is the very edge of civilization. It's full of dangerous people and wild animals. Yes, she said, I can. And that was that. So again, I just want to keep talking about how every time Esther is told, no, you can't do that, she does it anyway. She doesn't let anyone deter her from what she wants to do. So she is very determined. In Illinois, she fought long and hard to claim Artemis's land, but was denied an inheritance because she was female. So Esther opened another hat shop. Esther met and married John Morris, a merchant and immigrant from Poland. And in 1851, she gave birth to twin boys, Edward and Robert. But John had a hard time making a living. So while Esther raised the children, cooked the meals, and washed the clothes, she helped earn the money too. Wow, she is a really, really strong woman who does a lot of stuff. When Esther was 46, she went with John to the presidential election polls and watched through the window while he voted. You know, she told him when he came out, I could do that. Politics is the business of men, my dear, he said. Said Esther. It's our country too. So I want all you to think right now. Esther's working hard. She's raising her 3 children. She's doing all the work at home to keep the house running, the laundry and the food, and she's also helping her husband make money, earn a living. Do you think she should have the right to vote? When war broke out between the northern and southern states, Esther was proud that Archie joined the victorious fight of the North to end slavery. Soon after, an amendment to the Constitution granted African American men all rights of citizenship, including the right to vote. So again, this is a pretty big part, boys and girls, so I want to stop here and check for understanding. I want you to understand that at this part of the text, and at this part of Esther's life, there is a war going on in the United States. This is called the Civil War. And during this time, the northern part of the country and the southern part were fighting to end slavery. The north part of the country wanted slavery to end, and the south wanted slavery to continue. It says that Archie, her son, joined the fight. So he was fighting in the north. He was some of the people who wanted to end slavery. And after the war was over, slavery did end. And African American men were able to vote, just like white men. So they had made an amendment or a change to the law, the voting laws. When Esther heard Susan B. Anthony speaking about women's rights, Esther began to hope that someday women might vote too. In 1869, when Esther was 55, she and her 18-year-old sons moved to the newly formed Wyoming Territory, where John and Archie, who'd gone there the year before, waited. Esther and the boys traveled by train across miles of prairie, then by stagecoach over rocky hills to South Pass City, a dusty, hurriedly built town where gold had been found. Most of the 2,000 people who lived there were rowdy young men. The Morrises moved their belongings into a small log cabin, and South Pass City became home. John tried his hand at another business. Archie bought a printing press and started a newspaper. Esther opened another hat shop. But with 6 men to every woman, there was always a need for someone to nurse the sick and wounded, sew clothes, help deliver babies, and give motherly advice to the few young women in town. I could do that, Esther said, and she did. So Esther is moving along. She's getting older. She's moved to a new town, a new community, which needs a lot of help. So how does she help that community? She's helping them by helping the women that are there, giving them motherly advice, helping nurse the sick, helping deliver babies, taking care of the clothes. Again, just doing so many things. And on top of that, having her hat shop. One day, Esther read a proclamation tacked to a wall. All male citizens 21 and older are called to vote in the first territorial elections. Esther looked around at the disorderly young men. It's time that I did that, she said. When Esther's son watched her march toward home, they knew it was more likely that things were about to change than that things would stay the same. Esther invited the 2 men running for the territorial legislature to her house to speak to the citizens. Then she sent out invitations to the most influential people in the territory. Come for tea and talk to the candidates. Remember, the candidates are the people who are running for election, the people who want to become in charge of the town. She scrubbed her tiny home from top and bottom, washed the curtains, and ironed her best dress. When the candidates and guests arrived, Esther served them tea. One thing I like about Wyoming, she said, is how everyone is important. It takes all of us to run the town, women as well as men. Yes, her guest agreed, and it's a place where people aren't afraid to try new things. Her guest agreed again. Esther smiled. She turned to the candidates. Then, would you, if elected, introduce a bill in the legislature that would allow women to vote? Suddenly, in that tiny room full of people, not a sound was heard. So wait, Esther proposed or told the men in the room, asked them, would you, if you became mayor of our town, would you change the law, change the legislature, and say that women could vote? And all of a sudden, silence. None of the men had anything to say. Suddenly, in that tiny room full of people, not a sound was heard. Finally, Colonel William Bright spoke. Mrs. Morris, my wife would like to vote too. She is intelligent as well as educated. Truth be told, she would be a more informed voter than I. If I am elected, I will introduce that bill. Not wanting to be outdone, the other candidate, Herman Nickerson, also agreed. Applause broke out in that tiny cabinet. Yay! Thank you, she said. People warned her that once the bill was introduced, the men of the legislature would have to approve it, and the governor would have to sign it. This had never happened anywhere. Why did she think it could happen here? But Esther had seen that the things were not likely to happen. Happened every day. She wrote letters and visited legislators to make sure this bill would happen too. And it did. On December 10th, 1869, Governor John Campbell signed this bill into law. Wyoming women got the vote. So boys and girls, you can see that Esther did it. She set out for something else. She wanted women to be able to vote in her town. And sure enough, after working hard and being determined and not stopping when people told her to stop, she was able to make that happen in the town of Wyoming. Women across the country rejoiced for the women of Wyoming, but some people didn't like it. Only 8 days later, Judge James Stillman, the county's justice of the peace, turned in his resignation. That means that he quit his job. He refused to administer justice in a place where women helped make the laws. Word went out that a new justice of the peace was needed. Esther's boys turned to her. Mama, you could do that, they said, and so she applied. And just a little check-in here, just to make sure you understand, there was a judge who was supposed to sign the law into place that women in Wyoming could vote. But the judge didn't like this idea, so he quit his job. So Esther's sons turned to her and said, Mama, you could do that. You could be the judge. What do you guys think? Do you think she's going to try to become the judge? Do you think she will become the judge? Archie, then clerk of the court, proudly swore his mother in, making Judge Esther Morris the first woman in the country to hold public office. But Judge Stillman refused to turn over the official court docket to Esther. Never mind, she said. Archie, will you please go to the mercantile and buy me a ledger? I'll start my own docket. And of course, she did. On September 6th, 1870, 1 year after her tea party, remember the one at her house, Judge Esther Morris put on her best dress and walked with her husband John and her sons down the dusty street to the polling place. That's where you vote. She would be one of 1,000 Wyoming women voting that day, the first ever given that right permanently by any governing body in the United States. As they walked, John, who still didn't think women should vote, tried to coach her on which candidates and issues to vote for. Esther held up her hand. I can do this, she said. And she did. Whew, that makes me want to cry, this story. Whew, and remember, it's real. So this woman, Esther Morris, became the first judge in the United States. She also became one of the first women to ever vote in the United States. So what an amazing woman she was. Here she is at the polling place, and that is an illustration of her putting her very first vote in And it's just absolutely awesome. So I hope you guys enjoyed that story as much as I did. I actually do kind of tear up a little bit at the end and almost cry because I'm just so proud, and it's amazing to read a story about someone so awesome. I hope you enjoyed the story. There's more that you can read if you go on to our Epic app. There's a story about another woman who became judge, which I assigned to some of you. So if you want to read some more about women's rights and women's judges or whatever, you can go on to Epic and look for books on that. You can also watch the video that we posted on the 3 branches of government if you're interested in learning about our government in the United States and how things work and how amendments or changes can be made to our government and to our laws. Okay, have a great day. Miss you guys so much. I wish I could pinch those cheeks. And I will see you later.